Next methodology that we're going to cover is the Rapid Application Development, also known as RAD. This is another agile methodology, and you'll see some of the similarities as well as some of the differences, and the reason that it's its own methodology compared to agile or the Scrum methodology. So with rapid application development, it's a very incremental approach, working through things multiple times and kind of building upon something and making it better. In addition, the components and functions are built in parallel with each other. So we'll go into that in a little bit more detail, but that is the kind of the number one thing that separates the rapid application development from other methodologies. Developments have very tight time frames. So as it goes kind of without saying, because of the name rapid application development, they need something out the door quickly. They need a product that's usable, that's buildable, that's billable, whatever that is, and they need to get that out the door right away. As well as these kind of mini projects, if you will, are pulled together into a working prototype. So again, we'll cover that a little bit more as to how they segment out and how they work together. Feedback is received and prototype is refined. So again, we'll talk about that a little bit more as you work through the process. You're splitting up the development, having multiple groups work on it. You're pulling it together into a prototype, getting feedback, and working back through additional and incrementing and iterating back through to build on that particular product. And then you keep repeating that until all the requirements are met, that business need is solved for. So let's look at what the rapid application development, I'm going to call it RAD for the rest of the lecture, what it looks like. So it starts out with an analysis and a quick design, and then you get into your iteration or your increments where you're demonstrating, refining, developing. So you're developing, demonstrating, refining, developing, demonstrating, refining, and you're creating this prototype and you're building on this prototype. And then once you're complete there, you work through testing and deployment. And if you've seen the Scrum model or Agile methodology or the iterative methodology, you'd say, what's the difference with this one? Are we just moving faster, right? I mean, it's the same concept. You work through analysis, then you're iterating through, then you're to get a final product, then testing and deploying. Well, here's the main difference. This is actually what the rapid application development looks like. You start out with an analysis and a quick design, but then once you've done that, you then are segmenting out that particular product into multiple segments. So independent products, if you will, that will talk to each other. And that's done with these different teams. As you can see after the analysis and quick design, you have 1, 2, and 3. Those are designating different project teams or development teams that are working through and looking to solve their segment of requirements with a piece of the product. So ultimately, they're working independently at the same time. Everybody is working consecutive together. You ultimately have 3 different projects going to pull together one product. Once everybody's run through their first iteration or few iterations and deemed a good point, you pull all that together into a working prototype. So now you need to pull those separate project teams, all their solutions together, have them work together, talk, and build this prototype that then can be shown to the business, where they can give feedback, they can refine things, they can talk about what they like and don't like, what needs to change, additional features and requirements that need to be added, and then you work back from the prototype back into the different project teams here. So you're bouncing back from the prototype as needed to go back and continue iterating through to build out all the necessary features. In the end, you have a working prototype, and that is where you ultimately are taking it, making it a prototype, and then turning it into the actual production solution that's going to be utilized. So now that it's a prototype, if it's the final prototype, you work through your testing and all the different project teams are engaged, and then to deployment. So there's the big difference is you split it up into multiple pieces and then you work on them at the same time. And that allows you to get that product out the door much faster, and hence the name, the rapid application development. So let's talk about the pros and cons a little bit of this particular methodology. Well, the obvious one is it's a reduced time to develop. So it's going to take you less time to develop when you have all these different people working on segments and pushing it through. That timetable, that schedule is going to be much shorter. Another thing is you can reuse a lot of components. Since you're building this kind of segmented product, if you will, and you're building this standalone piece, you're able to potentially reutilize parts of that in future products as a piece. So you can reuse some of those components and some of those pieces that were built. It also encourages customer feedback. So since you're working through that and then creating a prototype, showing it to the business and saying, okay, we're 10% into this, but here's our first prototype, what do you think? You're able to get feedback, you're able to refine and update the requirements and whatnot to be able to meet that user need. So you're able to encourage customer feedback very early on in the product rather than way at the end in a typical waterfall methodology. And then you're tackling integration early, which avoids issues later. So by pulling it all together into a working prototype, you're taking all these segments, and obviously, you know, one of the challenges, one of the inherent challenges of all these different, you know, project teams working on kind of separate segments that pull together in one product is they're going to have to talk. Well, since you're pulling that together into a prototype, you start solving for that a little bit earlier, and you start talking integration with other systems really early because the project teams need to know if that's part of their particular project, their particular segment of the product. So what are some of the cons? One thing is you need a strong team to identify business requirements. Since these project teams, initially you're going through the analysis and the quick design, and then the project teams are splitting out, you need a person that can identify those requirements and do it really well, because they're ultimately supplementing 3 teams with requirements. Another thing is you need to be able to segment or modularize your product. Some products, it just doesn't make sense. You wouldn't be able to do it very easily and be able to break it up into different pieces. So you need to be able to do that. If you can't have 3 standalone independent segments or modules, there's no way that you can pull it off with a RAB type of development. So you need something that kind of adheres to that model. There's another high dependency on modeling skills. So as you're working through, you need to have a really good understanding of how all of these are going to work together in a process, in data flow, in an activity flow. And so you need to have somebody or some people that know how to model, how to do data modeling, activity modeling, process modeling, and are able to kind of pull that all together and make sure that all these modules can meet that end result once they're all combined. And last but not least is it requires a highly skilled developer and designer team. So you're taking lots of developers, lots of designers, and you're having to split them up. So there's a lot of resources used because you have to have these different project teams. Well, because of that, you need to have highly skilled people in each particular team to help drive that design and that solution. So this way, this model is very risky in the sense that you're getting it done really fast, but you need to make sure you have the right processes and procedures in place internally in your business to be able to make sure that this is successful and you're not just building 3 modularized pieces that can't end up being used together. So when should you use the RAD, the Rapid Application Development? Well, you need to system up really quickly. In 2 to 3 months, you need something that can be working and be utilized and kind of goes with it, but you have to, as well, you have to be able to modularize. So a system that can be broken apart and needs to be done really fast. Another time when to use it is when there's a high availability of quality designers and developers to be able to position them across the different project teams. You're going to need a large budget. You have a lot of people that are going to be working on this particular product, and you have additional requirements that are coming out as trying to pull these together. So you end up paying for the speed. So not only are you defining what the requirements are for the business, you now have to split those up, so it takes time to split them, and then it's going to take time to pull them all back together into a working prototype. And those are just costs of the rapid application development that you normally wouldn't hear in a lot of other models. And last is the resources need to have really high business knowledge, and they need to be dedicated to the project. So since this is moving really fast, they need quick answers, quick decisions being made, and they need correct decisions being made. They need that business user, that sponsor, that business owner to be driving them in the right direction. Because if they get going a week in the wrong direction with 3 or more teams, I'm kind of using the concept of 3 teams, it could be 10 teams working together. You kind of multiply that 1 week by multiple teams, and now you've lost 3 weeks of development in a time where you are trying to get this done in record speed, and it just doesn't work. So that's when you use the Rapid application development. So I haven't seen this used a ton in most businesses today. I'm sure there's going to be some companies that need to be quick to market in certain things, and they have the resources available. Very big companies may use something like this if they need to get something out to compete, or they at least want to get something workable out the door that they can then work through and help develop and create. So if this is something, this may be more something where maybe a company's trying to get quick to market and be the first to market a particular product or system to be able to grab some of that market share and then kind of work from there.